Hey, I know, like, you know where I'm at, like, hey, Jeff, no, I got you, brody. Look, hey, let's go, hey.
What is it?
Real life, real talk, never fall, we ain't doing that. Want me fall off, but I can't, I'm just too attached. I was so lost, I ain't going back. Never fall, never fall. We on the road, yeah, we on the road. Every day like the Olympics gon' go. Yeah. I'm in control, I thought you should know. Real life, real talk, never fall.
What's up, guys? I'm here today with my two friends. You probably already know them, Harry Bickers and Denver Chandy. If you don't know who they are, you should know who they are. I'm not going to go and give them a nice introduction because I feel like you're going to get to know them a little bit as we go. All I'll say is there's a lot of knowledge and experience in the show right now. So I hope you all make the most of it and really listen to what they say, because I've myself picked up a lot of things from both of them. And the cool thing about what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and we might have different opinions, which is fine because it's bodybuilding and there's no rules. So I might have an opinion, Denver might have an opinion, Harry might have an opinion, or we might all agree on everything. Who knows? We're going to find out. But yeah, today's one is really the episode today is really put together for people in New Zealand who, not just New Zealand, there's going to be other, you'll be able to relate to it wherever you are, but especially in New Zealand where you're picking shows this year and you're approaching that time probably now or very soon where you're going to start your preparations. Just trying to get you thinking the way we suggest you should, or approaching things the way we would advise you to if you were to ask us. And I'm assuming you want our opinions because you're listening. So I'm going to kick it off with basically the most simple thing, but I feel like it's something that's very overlooked in terms of what people actually talk about, and it's just picking a show. I want to hear your guys' take on what you would advise. It doesn't need to be a beginner. It can be a beginner, or it can be someone who's a little bit more experienced, but basically what would you guys advise? What things would you keep in mind? And what would you kind of suggest for someone if they're like, hey, I want to compete this year? And we could use the New Zealand comp calendar as an example, because I feel like there's shows 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 7 weeks before nationals, and there's I think 24 weeks until the last regional off the top of my head, maybe 23. But yeah, either of you, one of you can start, but let me know what you guys think, and then I'll go at the end.
You go, Denver.
All right, picking a show. I reckon first thing would be trying to get some advice from someone that's going to be honest with you, not from your friend, so you can kind of get a good gauge of where you are, body composition wise. Because a lot of people, I feel, and I don't mean this in a bad way, see themselves a lot leaner than they actually are. I'm like, 100%. Everybody thinks they're on stage at 2-3%. I'm like, we're far off that. 5%, you're probably shredded to the bone. So I feel like just having a starting point, one would be a good thing to get from maybe a coach. It could be one of the judges, some of that, and then setting a realistic date. And I'd say if it's your first comp, the longer the better. Trying to do it in 10 weeks. Honestly, for most people, that's unrealistic. I'd say take your time, spend 3-4 months, gradually bring your body fat down, try and hold on as much muscle as possible, and definitely lock in that date. Because I feel like when you have that date locked in, you got that switch in your brain where everything changes. The effort you put in the gym, the amount of sleep you have, how strict you are with your meals. Because as long as you have that open end where you're like, I think I'll do a show, I'm going to do a show, you still have that option to be loose with your diet or slack off with training. I think that should do. I don't want to talk to
Well, I mean, listen, man, I 100% agree. Most people's idea of where they're at is very different from the reality. And it's not just a matter of, so in my opinion, it's not just a matter of where the conditioning's at. It's a matter of how much muscle they have. So what I will often have is I will have a person come to me and say, I want to get ready for a show, and it's 12, 16 weeks away. And when I look at them, I'm like, okay, great, we can do that, but there's not going to be a whole lot of you left. There's not muscle-wise. So, I always think when somebody comes to me and it's their first time competing, and I think that we probably all do this even after they've been competing for a while. We say, no, let's aim. So if it was right now, I'd be aiming for the very end of the year, almost regardless of where they're at, because I'm thinking, hang on, we probably need X amount of time to put some muscle on and get into that pattern of eating. So, you know, as we all know, the biggest thing for everybody, even the seasoned competitors, is there's no pattern of eating. So you need to get that pattern of off-season eating in place. And then it's so much easier to change the numbers and configure everything to sort of bring them down again. But for me, like I just recently had a guy compete, looked amazing, but we were running on a short time span for the show, and he really needed to put some muscle on. So yeah, I think sometimes it's, I always tell people the best thing you can do is shortcut all of that stuff that people try to do themselves, and just get somebody to help you from the beginning, get your eating in place, get your training in place, and then, you know, really have a very clear set goal. But definitely, as you said, the more time you give it, the better. And then the more crystal clear your goal is, the more clear your goal is, the more clear all of your planning process can be. So yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess because we do it with people all the time, we understand what's the way to get the best result from them. Although, you know,
for sure.
Agreed.
I definitely like agree. Like the first thing and the most obvious thing is like just get a coach. Like there's so many people that are trying to figure out everything as they go, and they're starting out, and that's okay in some cases, but in other cases, like you'll talk to someone and they'll tell you what they're doing, and after prepping like hundreds of people, you're kind of like, you're so far from not even talking about optimal, but you're just so far from even doing things semi right that like you're just wasting so much time. And you're just going to continue to waste time until you actually hire someone and you start learning through things the right way. I think I know like one person, and like, I think I've been competing for 12 years, I think, maybe 11, but I think I know one person who prepped themselves for their first show and looked really good and did a really good job. That's one person. And there's like been so many of them. So obviously that's the first thing. And kind of my basic rule of thumb is to allow 20 weeks for a comp prep. Obviously, like, it's like you say, it's dependent on the muscles someone has, the conditioning they're at. If they're super lean, obviously you can do a little bit less. But my general rule of thumb for like a new client would be 20 weeks minimum. But I would also like some off-season time before that, as you guys said, to like prepare for the prep, get the food up where it needs to be, get the metabolism where it needs to be, make sure they're training right, blah, 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 so that when 20 weeks hits, it's smooth. We're not starting then, because if you're starting then, really it's probably like a 15-week prep, because by the time everything's, you know, working, you've wasted 5 weeks. So I also think like when people hear like 20-week prep, they get real like, oh my God, 20 weeks, like in their head, they're like going straight to low carbs and suffering from 20 weeks. It's not like that. You might even be eating more than you were before, but you're just, like you said, Harry, you're just getting into that regular eating, monitoring the food, learning the body, getting the metabolism firing, getting digestion good, inflammation down, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So we kind of all said the same thing, just in different ways, but I'm sure people will be able to like, you know, like they'll understand one of us. So let's lead to the next part. And what I wanted to talk about now is, we've talked about like when we would start a prep with someone, but basically like, how would you approach the start of, like, how would you approach the period? Say we're talking like 8 weeks before prep starts. How would you approach that time? And then transition into when prep starts, like how would you approach the start of prep in terms of food, training? There might be nothing, you might not even have anything to say, but like, is there anything you do in particular or you look for to basically set the prep up to be successful later on?
Should I go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. First thing, obviously, like Harry said, off season is making sure that we've put on a good amount of muscle through that period of time, and trying to get their food up as high as we can. Because the more calories we got to play with, the better. Yeah. And obviously taking into account trying to keep their body composition quite lean as well. I'm not trying to put on a ton of fat, you know, like I'd rather put on quality weight, so that way we've got more food to play with and less body fat to bring down. So we can keep performance in the gym optimal, rather than I feel like, you know, starving someone and then, you know, struggling in the gym and trying to not able to perform. Because I feel like when you train, what builds your muscle is what's going to keep that muscle. You know, trying to, you know, like if you train heavy, you got to train heavy all the way through. no one's saying be silly. Like in the last few weeks, you can probably eat back a little bit when you're really lean, but through most of your prep, trying to keep performance optimal, I couldn't be really good. So trying to get their food up as high as possible, making sure any injuries are assessed. If there's anything that's holding them back or anything like that, we can try and like fix those issues before getting into prep, rather than once prep starts, you've got all these niggles starting to come up. And honestly, one other factor would also be like, I feel like, are they financially ready for it? Because a lot of people want to get into prep and don't realize how expensive it is, just purely just food-wise, being a bodybuilder. I've had people sign up and be like, bro, just tell me what I need to do. And you send them a plan and be like, I can't eat this. I can't do this. I can't, can't spend that amount of time. So just making sure like all aspects are covered.
That's a good one. That's a real good point. And I think people need to keep that in mind when they say they want to go pro, because once they go pro, it's 10 times more expensive. Just the flights to America, the accommodation, that's going to cost you $6, $7, $8 and on its own. Like on top of the preps and the coaching and the the cycle and it's all cost money. So I think people don't think of that. Like that's a real good point, that one.
I reckon you see a lot of that as well, like in New Zealand as well. If you look at majority of the pros, what happens after they turn pro?
I think that's for multiple reasons, but
that's what I'm saying. Like there are other reasons there as well, but I'm just saying is like I feel like financially it's a limiting factor, because I mean, if you're not making the money yourself, I feel like in New Zealand, you're kind of limited when it comes to being sponsored or having someone helping you financially, whereas you have those options overseas.
For sure. Well, I mean, they're getting
a lot of pros. Paychecks, so. So there's a lot of pros I feel like end up not being able to either travel and compete professionally. Well,
that's a good point. And it's also, it comes down to how bad do you want it? You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. I mean, if you want to,
it's no secret that it's easier to turn pro in New Zealand than it is in other countries. Based on the fact that the level of competitors in other countries is higher. I mean, we've got some amazing competitors. I'm not saying we don't. We've had multiple people go to the Olympia and whatnot, but I'm just saying across the board, like if you go into the gyms, like these girls in the gyms that never competed in their life, they could get on a bikini stage in 2 and 4 weeks and look and like lights out. You know what I mean? This is just girls who just go to the gym. So it also comes down to that. Like if you've had to really grind for something, it's you compare it to like open bodybuilders. It takes a lot longer to turn pro as an open guy. Well, it should, because you've got to put a lot more time and effort into building that physique. It just takes longer. It's harder. You've got to have more muscle. Like it's a longer process versus someone in like a men's physique or bikini or whatever, where the process is a lot faster, just simply because you don't have to have the same amount of muscle. So sometimes, and I'm not saying this is all the time, but sometimes because they've done it so quick, they actually they enjoy it, but they're not like truly passionate about it. Versus a bodybuilder who spent 10 years building his body, you got to have passion for that. Like you have your ultimate. You can't do that unless you genuinely love it, and I think that can be the difference as well. But obviously, it's like financial. There's a lot of reasons for it. So I'm glad we segued there, but it's a
but I mean it's actually a very valid segue, because probably the truth is that when my experience with prepping people for their first contest, most of the conversations are about managing their relationships, managing their time, and how can they afford it? So it's great that you brought that point up, because what I find is that a lot of, how do I approach this? So a lot of people, as they're prepping for a high level competition, even because they're not financially where they should be to do that, to want to do all the things that they think they need to do to get ready for that level, a piecemeal picking it up as they go. I'm going to get this now. I'm going to get this now. And then, so it's like, they've got 6 weeks of their prep. They've got money for 6 weeks of their prep, but it's a 20-week prep. And they're like, somehow they're thinking that while they're dieting, focused on that, they're going to make that money so they can continue to the next and continue to the next. And they almost shoot themselves on the foot by setting an impossible level of availability, or, their means well above what's actually possible, when they're in that state. So, for first timers as well as the more advanced guys, I'm like, no, set yourself up from the beginning. Or even if it's just simple things like have that conversation with your partner, with your family, with your support crew, try to get everyone behind you. Those things make it easier. And I think a lot of people, when they do their first comp, especially, just think, oh, I don't want to tell people, I'm embarrassed. I'm like, no, tell everybody. Put the pressure on yourself, get the support, and, you know, and go for gold, and you'd be surprised how much help you get. But yeah, definitely that financial one's a really big one, because people don't realize how much effect the fatigue and those other things have on just getting your regular job done, let alone trying to make enough money to do a contest.
And sometimes sometimes that just comes down to like, people think like, oh, you know, I want to do the show, so I'm gonna have to like do extra work and whatnot to make more money to afford it. And like, well, okay, sometimes you might need to do that, but a lot of the time it's just being smarter and not being an idiot. And what you also need to remember is like, what people don't understand is like, you're going to be dieting, so there's going to be so many opportunities to save money as well. Like, obviously there's this things that you have to spend money on, it's expensive, but then like your food bill is going to come down most probably because you're eating less food. You're not going out 3 times a week and eating shit and spending $80, $90, $100 on a meal 3 times a week, you know, because people do that. And then they say they have no money, and it's just like crazy. You know, there might be things you need to go without. Like, if you're a female, you might not be able to get your nails done every 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, just, you can cut corners here and there to make it work. But it is a really good point, and I feel like it's something that needs to be explored later, like more in depth later down the track, because it's definitely something I've had issues with as well. I think with clients, financial.
And then I think a really big thing that we could, you know, that we could have a further conversation about at some stage, the massive social cost. There is a big social cost. I mean, and I think people don't really understand that at the outset, and that they don't understand how hard it is to cope with those things. So yeah, like I say, a lot of the time the conversations I'm having with people as I'm prepping them are more to do with that social aspect and managing that than anything else, because if they can't manage that part, it's like they can't manage anything, right? The whole lot just turns to shit, because they're, you know, and I guess for me, I spend a lot of time explaining to them that it's a finite time frame, a competition prep, and that when you're off season, even though you're eating to a plan, you do have a lot of flexibility. But, you know, we've all had those conversations. You're like, bro, you can eat whatever you want in 12 weeks. You can have it for breakfast, lunch, dinner. You can go out every single night. You just need to get through this time frame if you want to achieve that goal. So yeah. There's a big social goal. That's a whole other conversation, I guess.
Yeah, it's a big one though, and it's something that people really struggle with. But then at the same time, some people embrace it. So I think it also depends on the people you're around too. Like, absolutely. You know, they don't even have to have experience in it, but if they're supportive, you know. We went way off track there, but we were talking about approaching preps. I was just going to add. I can't remember what I was going to add now, but I was going to add something like. Just some things I like to do is like, I'm very particular, as you guys already know, but I'm very particular with like food sources and whatnot. So by the time we've started prep, I want all the shit I don't want in the plan. I want it long gone. And also, like, if a client is, I've actually had to have this conversation this week with 2 people. If a client is like cheating every week, even small things, or they're missing meals, they're missing training sessions, like before the prep starts, I will not prep them, because like we're not where we need to be to set you up well. And like, that's not me being like a control freak, but it's just, I want you to have the best experience possible and get the best outcome possible so that you can achieve what you've told me you want to achieve. And if we're not like where we need, like, it sounds crazy because 20 weeks to most people sounds like a lot of time, but it's not that long. And if we're not like at a certain point by then, we're going to be like running uphill the whole time. And it never goes well when you're running uphill the whole time. And most people don't have it mentally to be able to run uphill the whole time. There's some people who can go to hell and stay in hell for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and pull it off. But even then, like, the outcome's not going to be what it could have been if you had done the work earlier and set yourself up for what's to come. And that's something I try and like drill into everyone.
Absolutely.
But it's like an ongoing battle with like, it's more just people who haven't done it before, which is understandable because they haven't done it before. And it's like, I never knew this when I started either, but just trying to like teach them, like, you can't just cheat. You can't just add, like, before the prep, I allow a little bit of freedom with meals, like once a week or whatever. Some people more than want, depending on their conditioning and metabolism, but like outside of that, you have to be on, and you have to be training hard. And like, there'll be days where you can't, you're in the gym and you're not hitting the numbers you normally hit. You have those days here and there. That's fine. But you have to be at least trying your best, and it should, just consistent with all the variables, basically. So for me, like, it's just about, that last bit, like, it's pretty much what you guys said. It's just getting getting to a certain point in composition, but also how your body's functioning. So
I meant to say that about digestion, and that's one of the things that we all do. Certainly, I've taken some notes from you, Jordan, when it comes to that, is making sure that people's digestion is good and they can actually process the foods they want, what foods they can actually stomach day after day after day, this and that. So that's a big one as well. It makes it a lot easier, because people think it's going to be chicken and broccoli, and half the time it isn't, because most people can't digest broccoli.
But perfect. You say that, because a lot of the time, like, they think like it just means eating clean. It doesn't. Like I don't know what you guys do, but I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of having like a lot of plans oats, because I feel like for a lot of people it bloats them. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people it bloats them. Same with like bread. That depends on the types of bread. But like there's just certain foods that there are examples, and I'm not saying it's like a blanket statement, but just for a lot of people, I find that does these better options, and these things that I find when you change them to foods that digest easier, you can push the food way further up, because their body's just being way more efficient with it. But that's a lot of it is common sense. Like, it's so much of this is just common sense if you break it down. But for some reason, people need like to read a study and a scientific like chart to make it credible. But like, you do it with enough people, you kind of get the gist. But anyway, we'll move on. I want to now take it even further back, because I feel like for me, one of the biggest things, you guys tell me if you I know Harry, you probably agree with me. At Denver, I don't know. You're crazy, but for me, like one of the biggest things if I'm talking about like things I wish I could change when I was younger, would be when I was young, it wasn't a problem back like mid-20s. Like I wish I took the off season seriously, or not necessarily like serious, but like more serious than I did, because as you guys know, you can fast track your progress and development like by light years if you do. But I also think like sometimes, because I harp on about it so much, I feel like sometimes people get the wrong idea when I talk about the importance of an off season. Like, it's not the same as prep. You should still have that like mindset of like, this is my diet, I'm not going to cheat, I'm going to have my meal off a week, but at the same time, like, this is just what I allow. I'm sure you guys will probably agree, but you guys can add to it after. Like if there's like, social events, Denver, you want to go get sushi after training, on your whatever, your birthday, whatever, let's go, bro, I'll shout you, whatever. Things like that, it's fine. Like, that's okay to do, as long as you're not taking the piss and you're being consistent with everything, and you're not having like McDonald's every day, and you're not missing training. Like, as long as you're training hard every time you go to the gym based on your program, you're eating all your meals, you do have that freedom. Like, you don't have to be like, hey, Jordan, it's my birthday, do you mind if I have a meal with my family? Like, don't even ask me, because it's fine. You're off season. You're not in prep. Prep's a different story, but you're not in prep. You can have that flexibility. But I also will say, don't like abuse that as well. And don't be like, oh, I was just bored, so me and my mate went out to eat like on a Monday, like for no reason. Like, it's different. Like, to me, that when you start getting to that point, it's just becomes like, unless you're so in tune with your body and you understand your body needs and you're experienced, which I'm not talking to those kind of people right now. I'm talking to people who are newer. You need to be on your plan the rest of the time. Would you guys agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
What was the question again? You kind of went.
Well, so just basically like your approach to the off season, like for yourself and for other people, like how do you balance having an off season that's really effective, but also not getting too like comp prep about it? Because I feel like if you're too comp prep about it for like years and years and years on end, you're just going to end up probably giving it away, because it's like you can only be, like you can't be like that all the time. So like basically like how do you have a successful off season but also have a life? Like what or maybe you don't allow that. Maybe you're trying
to put two things together that don't.
Maybe no one's allowed a life for you. You know what I mean? Like, you tell me, man.
For me, when I first started, I personally think, and you've said this before as well, like looking back, I really wish I had a coach. Being honest, it's not because I didn't put in the work or I cheated on my diet or I cheat on my meals or go out and have stuff and stuff like that. No, I never struggled with that aspect of stuff. For me, it was always overdoing stuff, like overtraining, overdoing the cardio, like under eating, just because I just wanted to be so good and look my best. I just want to, like, I always felt like more was better. And sometimes having a coach to tell you do less can be a good thing as well. That was for me anyway, personally. You know, it might not be for most people, but like for me, I was overdoing stuff. You know, I never like cardio. I'm like, bring it on. Like I can kill 3 hours in the gym if you want to. If it's gonna get me peeled, I'll do it. But for my body type, that ended up being a hindrance.
I know you can do 3 hours in the gym. I've been here with you, bro.
It's I mean, I think that off season is, I mean, it differs from person to person, and the best thing about, I guess, getting somebody to help you or getting a coach is that they can work with you and help you with the things that you need to do, because one person needs to do more cardio, one person needs to do less. The way that I structure my off seasons is I try to still focus on eating to a meal pattern so I get clients to eat to a pretty similar meal pattern, so that when we switch into, like, if they want to get leaner, it's literally just, okay, so you can just take this out, that out, like reduce those things. We might change some food types. It's not a big deal, like, you know, doing this sort of crazy off, you know, so much food and all these different varieties, and all of a sudden they're switching it. I try to keep everything pretty consistent the whole time, and I explain to them that's how they're going to get the best result. However, it's hard for them sometimes to do that, so I give them I'll give them outs, but my outs will be, look, man, you can go and you want to go out for dinner, go and have a steak, go and have this, but try to have, I try to set protein minimums to assist with recovery. And I tell them the things that, you know, we have conversations, you know, we would have had through a prep period where we've worked out what things they can't eat, what things don't agree with them. If they have those things in the off season, it's on them. I find getting them to stick to an eating plan off season is hard, but it's 100% the best way to progress. And I know that sort of in my 20s through to my 30s, I was very regimented with my eating, with my training, with everything. And I made the most significant progress in that period of time. So yeah, I always tell people the better you can stick to a plan, even the better off you are. And managing it with your social just means, you know, being smart with your choices of cheat meals. So yeah, I think we're all in the same sort of mindset there. It's harder because we went, you know, I mean, I went, you know, Denver, you're right in the throes of it, you know, Jordan as well, you know, where it seems like it's so easy to stick to this shit off season because that's what I need to do to progress. Getting a new person on board with that is really difficult. But, you know, what I found motivates a lot the people that I come into contact with and deal with, and I'm sure it's exactly the same for both you two monsters, if not amplified, is that they see that consistency in what you do. You know, so most of the people that we come into contact with are the day-to-day people that we see in the gym, or the ones that follow our stories, and they see this consistency. And that I find is the biggest motivator, I think, that helps them, is that they're like, okay, so this 100-year-old man is obviously super consistent because he's still doing all of these things. And, you know, I find that's the easiest way for me to sell it. Like, you know, I'm older, I still lift well, I still train well, I still look jacked-ish. And I do that because I'm consistent, and I sell that point, you know what I mean? And I guess that's what we all, in our own way, we try to do it. Or if not that, you know, I see that you guys constantly posting your clients' pictures, and that in itself feeds on, you know, the other people that you deal with. You're like, okay, these guys know what they're doing, and that's the reward for the sacrifice.
Yeah, for sure. Like, one thing I used to do is, like, I would eat different foods off season and pre-comp. And the reason I would switch them pre-comp is because I knew that they would digest better and I would look better eating them. So I was like, I got to this like point where I was like, this is so dumb. Like, why would I not just eat all the same stuff all the time in larger amounts? You do it, and then all of a sudden, oh, I feel so much better. I'm eating so much better. My metabolism's better. My digestion's better. The only thing I will say is, like, when you're working with a client off season and you're building their food up, the food will get to a point where you can start to allow for other things. I'll just random things like, I don't know, LCM bars or something, if you know, sugary stuff, whatever. If still things that digest well, and you know they're going to digest well with the client, but when you're coming down and your calories are low, you obviously want to be, if he has too much stuff like that in the plan, they're not going to be full, and they're going to, you know, they're not going to function well. But I want to move on because I got some pretty good questions. There's two I really want to get your guys' thoughts on. I'm quite interested myself to hear what you have to say. Like, the first one is about training, and someone asked, high volume heavy versus low volume heavier, what do you prefer? And I feel like that's a good question. And I feel like my problem is I feel like people either here or they're here, and no one wants to come here. But I want to hear you guys say first. Denver, you start.
All right, sweet. Again, going back to what I said before, like personally for me, again, it was doing too much volume when I first started. And I feel like sometimes, even though I know I'm doing that and I shouldn't be doing that, it's so easy to fall back into. I do feel like pulling back on the volume can increase performance a lot. Because like I'm doing at the moment, you know, trying to save yourself for your heavy sets, not trying to burn yourself out the whole workout, knowing which sets you're pushing to failure and which sets to hold back on. Whereas before, you know, it's just a bodybuilding mentality, you know, it's like every set you're just going for gold, you know. So by the time you get to your top set, you could have ideally probably performed better and got more weight or more reps if you had to keep a bit of you know, energy in the tank for those sets. So I do feel like personally, for most people, I feel like I wouldn't say like I feel like going too low in volume. Personally, I feel like is more injury prone. Whereas again, too high in volume, I holds back performance. You know, so somewhere in the middle where you're getting your heavy loads, you're getting more sets like that you're finishing off, which are more volume based, which is more pump or contraction based. I think would be ideal. That's where I see it anyway.
The only basically I was going to say exactly what you just said. Somewhere in the middle where you're still getting your progression, but then you're also volumizing the muscle with. That's exactly how I train clients. I've trained clients like that for years. But all I will add is it also depends on who you're talking about, because as we know, some people train like Denver. You can do low volume. Harry, you can do low volume. I know how you guys train, and you can get amazing results. But I know other people who aren't going to push like you guys are going to push. Yeah. They're not going to contract their muscles like you guys are going to contract. So I'll see guys doing low volume. They're doing half reps. They're not using a full rock. Like they're just not training hard. And for people like, or even beginners who you know, you kind of learn how to push yourself to those points. Like a beginner can train hard, but they're not going to tax the muscle because they're still learning. So in those cases, I think more volume is beneficial because they're simply not going to be able to do enough within those fewer sets to do the damage and to cause the growth. But then once you get to a certain point, like once you're no longer a beginner, I'm definitely more what you said, and like in the middle, somewhere in the middle, still depending on the person, but definitely not low volume. I've tried that. I'm not a fan of it. Like you say, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen in terms of getting injured. But I also think like you need volume, especially with like the lower body. There needs to be volume there to give your leg, to develop legs properly, develop lower body properly. I feel like if you just did low volume all the time, I don't know, I just feel like you wouldn't get that, you know, that detailed gnarly look. That's just what I think personally. But yeah, for sure, like I said, the only caveat there is if someone's new or if they're not training hard. Like sometimes I'll notice a client's not kind of progressing like I think they should be, so I'll just push the volume up because I know that like they're not putting in 10 out of 10 effort. They're probably putting a 7 out of 10 effort. So okay, let's just add a few more sets. That's definitely not the optimal way to do it, but for them it's just so, you know what I mean? Like you can't be in the gym with them, dragging them and forcing them to do reps. You know what I mean?
My 2 cents would be that when somebody's a beginner, you're just teaching the movement patterns. So you're doing volume, you're doing, you know, 3 sets, 10 kind of thing, because you're trying to teach them how to do the movement. And then there's a certain point at which you start, like you were saying, you start to push intensity a little. So what I've found when I get those people who are stalling, I don't really like to add a lot of sets. Like I don't really like to add a lot of volume, but what I do is I start actually getting them to count reps, count weight, because at the end of the day, if you're putting a 7 out of 10 effort in and you bench 100 kilos and then you're putting that same, but you'll progress, because people progress, they'll progress with that anyway. And then, you know, in 3 months, they're pushing 120 kilos and they're doing the same number of reps. They've made that progress. So so I still try to keep the volume moderate, especially on big compound exercises, I guess, you know, because there's a difference between shifting a big compound, doing a big compound movement and how many muscles are involved. And I try to keep the volume a little bit lower on those. And then I might throw in, you know, more sets of an isolation exercise. So, and then I guess, I mean, I've definitely know how you train. I've seen you train, Jordan for 1,000 years, and I know you train with him for a while. We probably do the similar sorts of things. I mean, I just conserve my energy, work up to a really, the nuts and bolts of it is that I work up to a heavy set in a certain rep range. On one exercise, it might be 6, on another it might be 12, and then I do that set to as much as I can. I chase numbers there, progressive overload, but I'm always mindful of technique and form and execution. I feel execution is paramount. And then I'll do a back off set and try to crack out more reps there. So I'm still getting all that blood flow into the muscle and, et cetera, et cetera. And then I might move on to a single joint movement or a machine movement that allows me to do a lot more reps without, with weight, without danger. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think that it is, again, that middle area of volume. I don't like throwing a lot of volume at people, even beginners. I try to keep it moderate, just learn the movements, work on execution, and then build it up from there.
So I think we can all agree we're somewhere in the middle.
We're all somewhere in the middle. But I mean, I feel like it's really important to me. I think it's really important to say that, like, loading is super important, as long as your form is, as long as you have a really high focus on form. So, as you were saying, pre-recording this, Denver, you're sort of trying not to let your power get away, and you're trying to focus a lot on form. So it's moving the weight. To me, it's moving the heaviest weight that I can for the reps that I want with the form that I want. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes when people think volume, they just get away from loading. So it doesn't necessarily mean the loading has to be heavy, but it has to tax you in that movement. If that makes sense. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah,
well,
I mean? You're working a muscle, you're doing an incline chest press, not an incline press. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you still try, and you want that, at the end of the day, you want that to improve. You want those weights to go up. You want those reps to come up. And sometimes I think people have really, I think guys get really sidetracked with an idea of, okay, I need to really focus on the contraction. Yeah, dude, focus on the contraction, but not with the 10-kilo dumbbell. Focus with the 60-kilo dumbbell. Yeah. Or always aim up. Always look up. Don't always sort of be like, okay,
like work up to it too.
That's what I mean. Like always,
don't go from the 20 to the 60 in like a week.
No, progressive. So just do that progressive, and then those little things all add up. But I feel like I always try to teach a progressive mindset in terms of loading, but I am very hard on execution. So when I'm trying, I'm very hard on the.
So is Denver. You'll know if he started posting training videos like he should.
Coming soon.
He's going to post a leg press video sent me last night. He's going to, and it's ridiculous. But we'll move on. We're kind of all in agreement there, and I feel like everyone we got our point across. So someone asked me, after 6 years of training, what's a good cycle? So I'm just going to, before anyone says anything, we are not doctors. This is not advice. This is just opinions based off past experiences, whatever. And what I will also say is 6 years of training doesn't necessarily mean you should be looking at, I should have looked at the profile who asked us. I'm sorry, I didn't look at your profile, but just because you've trained for 6 years doesn't necessarily mean it's time, because you might have been training for 6 years, doing the wrong things, eating the wrong things, blah, blah, blah. But let's just say it's 6 years of training properly, and eating properly. Well, the first thing you should do is get a coach, because if you had a coach, you probably wouldn't have asked me this, or us this, but you guys can start this one if you want to. I mean, my answer is really boring.
Yes, I feel like all their answers are going to be boring, right? Because there's no, like, everyone thinks it's magic. As you know, like, I've known you for a long time, Jordan. I'm a minimalist, so I think that most of the time, the best thing you can do is get a coach.
Hang on, are we talking about a male, by the way, guys? Just so you know, it's a male.
Yeah. I always think, like, because if you just look online or you talk to the wrong people, you're going to find yourself in a position where their idea of what's a starting dose to me is like nuts. So I mean, obviously, we all get asked that question a lot. What's the best thing to do? And I always would say just the lowest. Start low. see how your body responds, and then go from there. Give yourself plenty of room to move. I mean, you guys have got to remember, I'm so old. I started when we first did cycles. They came out of a 200 ml bladder that had 75 milligrams per mil, and we were like of testosterone, and we'd take a half of that and go, yeah, I'm on it, like I'm killing it. And you know, you take a 5 milligram Dianabol, and we made great progress. You know, and then as time progresses, guys are like, I want to start. Somebody told me 500 milligrams of test. Like, whoa, stop. You don't need to do that. So I feel like just the minimal, the least you can
250 to 300 milligrams of test. As long as a test is pretty standard, I would say. I don't know if it's common. I think most people probably use more, but I feel like that's enough to just kind of see what happens. You're gonna put, if you don't put muscle on taking that, you're doing something wrong. Like you're
that's exactly right. Take everything else first. I mean, I would say even less than that. You can start on 125 milligrams of test if you've never taken anything, and you'll get a good response if your eating's good and your training's good.
But no one's going to do that. So
some people do.
But also what I'll say is, like, before, if you are going to go down there, if you haven't used anything before, like the most important thing you need to do, and you will not think of this at the start because you're just thinking you want to get jacked, go get your bloods done before you put anything in your body.
Get a baseline.
Get everything checked. Everything. If anyone's watching this and you want to know what I recommend getting checked, I'll send you the form and you can take it to your doctor and just say, hey, can I get all this checked? Your doctor might want to check more things as well. But basically, just go to your doctor, get your bloods done, and it'll just give you, you'll just see where you're at. So then you'll do your cycle for 8 to 10 weeks or however long you choose to do it. And then you can get your bloods done again. You can see get it done straight after the cycle. Your bloods might be perfect. If you're doing a very low dose of testosterone, it's very likely they will stay very good. But just see what they're like and then do them again. Like you'll go off for 8 to 10 weeks, get them done again before you start the next one. Make sure your testosterone is back within range. If you're gonna plan on doing cycles, I recommend letting your testosterone come back into range. Make sure all your lipids and make sure everything is back to where it needs to be. It's not just about your testosterone, because everyone thinks, oh, my testosterone's back, I'm good to go back on. But what about your kidneys? What about your liver? Blah, 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 blah. So just make sure everything's back to normal and look for, as you go, like there might be signs like your certain readings might be getting worse as time goes on. And if that's happening, you need to address that. There may be a reason for it. Maybe something to do with your diet, and maybe what you're using, maybe the brand you're using, and maybe the health supplements you're not taking. There's lots of things, but I just wanted to say that because for some reason, most people don't really look into that until someone makes them. I've had lots of people in the past, I've stopped working with them because they just wouldn't do that. They wouldn't get bloods. I'm not going to give you, you're not going to get bloods. I'm not going to talk to you about this stuff because it's like, I don't want to be associated with that. But Denver,
well, you don't want it's the liability, right? What do you think about that, Denver? What do you think about that beginning?
Definitely agreeing with you there, Harry. Minimalist approach. I feel like that's so overlooked these days. Especially, I feel personally the reason why that happened these days is just Google. Everybody that's the first thing they do, get big cycle or how to get, and you get sometimes you get these ridiculous numbers and they get that put into their head and they feel like that's what they need to do to start with. They're not realizing these cycles that they're seeing online could be from very advanced athletes, advanced bodybuilders that have been competing for 10 plus years, not someone starting out.
Or they're fabricated. I always tell people that the last person you should get your advice from is the guy selling it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wants a nicer car.
Like at the end of the day,
I agree with you. And get your blood work done. The hardest thing is to find a coach that will help you with that in the right way. So if you're in the market for a coach, try to find a coach who, when you're looking at the information that they put across, the clients that they have, there's a lot of talk about health and maintenance and those kinds of things. Like I'm big on getting I coach a lot of naturals and I'm still do your blood work. Let's see where everything's at. Because I feel like that's the best approach for longevity. So yeah.
You need to remember, like, if you start off big as well, where have you got to go? Like you should always like the most unhealthy part of bodybuilding is the cycles. Like 100%. People go about the diet and the preps. And, okay, but the drugs is what's the problem. Okay, so if you can minimize any possible future issues by just using less stuff. Why would you not want to do that? And generally, as you go, the bigger you get, your body will probably require more to a certain point. There's obviously going to be a threshold, but to a certain point, you're going to require more. So if you start off like, I'm going to take everything, I'm going to take, like I know guys who are small and they're using like using 1.5 to 2 grams of gear, and it's like, you're small. Like, where are you even putting that? Like, you have no muscle to put it in. It's just, you're just screwing yourself over. And most of those guys anyway, they don't last, and something goes wrong, or they, fall off the face of the earth. So, I mean,
and I think as Denver was saying, a big part of that is just people becoming, what's around, what the information that's on the internet, right? Everyone gets misinformed. I think that is literally the biggest problem. And I don't know, it's hard. It's also, there's a culture of it, more is better. Guys joke about it. Let's take this, and it's, trend this, trend that. You're like, and unfortunately, a lot of those people you can't tell. But when I come into contact with people and they talk to me about it, I always try to have a very, minimalist, common sense. Let's focus on your eating. Let's do that. And then what I feel works is that when they do those things, when they start to get all their ducks in a row, they find their progress they start progressing and they start doing well. So yeah, it's just hard. We want to sort of have those conversations with everybody, but it's so hard to do, right? Because a lot of them don't want to listen.
So our next one is Denver. How does it feel to be the biggest guy in New Zealand? Someone asked. I got to answer. They want to know.
I don't feel like that at all, bro. I'm like, you know me. I'm far from that. If anything, I'm always covered up because I feel like
you're tiny, bro. Like, you're so small.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel far from that. I feel like that might be from Cam or something.
No, it wasn't Cam. It was someone else.
Actual?
It wasn't. It wasn't.
All right, sweet.
And Harry, someone wanted to, wasn't it? This wasn't actually a question, but it was, can you stop taking everyone's plates in the gym? So.
Oh yeah, that would have been Vic.
It wasn't Vic. It wasn't Vic. Neither of you are right. I cannot give my sources away.
I can't. That's why I train at 5 o'clock, man. So nobody gives me a hard time. 5 in the morning.
Someone wants to know who the top 3 amateurs in New Zealand are in open men. And I feel like with currently with the amateurs, I feel like there's no standout top 3 open men. And I feel like it's open at the moment to far more than 3 people. And it's kind of like whoever's on, because I feel like shows are like this, like one guy will win and then they'll like, look, Connor won the pro card last year. I don't think he won his class at regionals, and then he came and won his pro card. So I feel like it's very hard to narrow it down to 3 people. I don't know. Terry, you probably don't know because you know.
Yeah, no, I got. Isn't it just you? Aren't you like the top 3?
No.
Isn't it just Jordan? No, I do see all the photos and I see all the shows. I follow it, but I don't know everyone, right? So I'm not too sure. But it seems to me like there's a few big boys coming up. Seems like there's a few big guys that I follow, and there's some units around. So hopefully this year will be a good year.
Sure, for sure. Like I said, it's like I'm not saying it in a negative way. I just think like there's not a standout. It's more just like whoever's on can. There's a bunch of them, probably 10 of them who could. If these guys are on and they're not, they'll win. And if there's people who should be winning shows, but they're not coming in on. You know what I mean? That's just how I see it at the moment.
I mean, I don't think he gets any. That's exactly how it is. I feel like any year some dude could come out of nowhere and
it happens all the time.
And clean it up, because
Denver,
it's all about conditioning at the end of the day.
All right, I'm on Jordan's side here when he said like again, this is not to offend anyone or say it in a bad way or anything like that. I feel like currently, like it might not be in past years, but at the moment, I feel like I'm just waiting to see someone in open bodybuilding level up, like show everybody that this is your year. Tell everybody that you're coming for that title. I feel like there was more of that in the past. Whereas now I feel like it's open. It's open, like it's like there's so many people that are say prepping to be open bodybuilders, but no particular ones that I feel that are leaps ahead of the others that are ready to take the title. So I feel like we've still got a long time to go. in the year. So maybe some we'll get some standout. But at the moment, I'll say I won't say any names because I feel if I start throwing out names,
Yeah, for sure.
Someone's going to burn your house down.
People will start taking offense and stuff like that. Why did I name someone and stuff like that? So show us all that you're ready to level up and take that title of Mr. New Zealand.
For sure. And like it's good you say that, because like if you like I'm just thinking back now, and I like going back to like 2012, 13, like it was like everyone knew it was like I think back then it was like Garth, Taina, Mateo, they were like the main guys, and then it kind of moved on to like I may get this a little bit around the wrong way, but I can't remember. But then it was like Sam and Kenny one year, and everyone knew it was out of those two. And then it was like Tom Shaw, and then it was you, Denver. And there's always been like, they're going to win, or one of these two guys are going to win. But like I said, like you said, there's not a standout. And last year was a great example of that. Like how I said, Connor didn't win. I don't think I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he didn't win his class. And then he came into nationals very much improved, and he won. So it just shows that like if you, it's there to be, it's there to be taken. And yeah, we didn't give that probably wasn't our best answer, but I guess that's the best we can.
It's
give.
also such a vague question because there's a lot of different divisions now.
Yeah.
One thing for me, I personally feel like the reason why we don't have those answers is because we don't have a lot of open bodybuilders in New Zealand. Everyone's either classic or men's physique. Like, look at the shows. Like, how many open bodybuilders do we actually have competing that you would see and think they were open bodybuilders? Most could probably drop the classic if they prepped another 5 weeks. Like I feel like.
Are you saying that most should drop to classic?
Huh?
No, he means the weight limit. He means the weight limit. He means the weight limit.
That's what I feel like's happening.
No, I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I'm like, shit. Hold up, my battery's dying. So I feel like that's the reason why we don't have these names to throw out, because there's this massive amount of athletes in classic and men's physique, whereas I feel like because it's so much harder to be an open bodybuilder and it's going to take so much longer for you to get there, the classes are so much smaller as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I forgot about Steve before.
I see it over here. I see it with all the shows here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. The numbers are not what they were, but I mean, it is what it is. I feel like classic's going to be the thing going forward anyway in terms of popularity. It's just what everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to be C-bum, and like you say, you can be smaller and do really well. And that may be because people don't want to be patient, or it may just be because people don't want to do the things they think they need to do to be an open pro. Like there's always there's sometimes a good reason for it. So yeah, but anyway, guys, that wraps up the questions. So it was good to have you both on. Thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm sure we'll have plenty more chats as the weeks go by. But yeah, if you're listening, if you like this, please like it. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm new to it. I keep forgetting to say that, but yeah, sweet guys.
Real life, real talk, never fall. We ain't doing that. Want me fall off, but I can't. I'm just too attached. I was so lost, I ain't going back. Never fall, never fall. We on the road.